got to do the right thing.
That's right.
You know? So what sparked your journey in aviation? What was that moment for you?
It's actually a really funny story. I would say that I've always had an interest in flying. I always enjoyed traveling with the family and staring out the window on airplanes. Now I kind of like the aisle seat. Now that I'm in the profession, the aisle seat's nice because you could just get up and go use the bathroom without bothering people. But at the age of 10, it was my 10th birthday. My aunt walks in with this huge box, and it was wrapped up. I tear it open, and it was a karaoke machine. And I'm not much of a singer, maybe in the shower, but not so much of a singer. And it came with a gift receipt. And I felt terrible, but I went to Best Buy, returned the karaoke machine, and bought Microsoft Flight Simulator. Yeah. So it all started with the karaoke machine. And I always joke, I say, I don't know where I'd be right now. Who knows? I might be more successful or maybe nowhere at all. But it all started essentially with that karaoke machine at the age of 10.
Wow. So so you get this karaoke machine, and you're like, here's a gift receipt, and Microsoft.
I was gonna say, it reminds me of a joke, you know, when you're singing and you're horrible and your buddy goes, "Hey man, what'd you do with all the money?" You're like, I took flying lessons.
That's right. And then from there it was just an ongoing battle to persuade the family, mom and dad, that this is a serious thing. I would run home from school with my two best friends, and we would just spend hours on our computer on Flight Simulator. And it wasn't until about the age of 13 that the folks started realizing, okay, well, I guess he's serious about this. And I met a lot of great mentors along the way, professional pilots, air traffic controllers, you name it, and started taking flight lessons at the age of 13 and just full speed ahead from there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And was the flight lesson that you were taking, were they a Part 61 course where it was kind of self-paced, or were you like all in with a 141?
It was even better. I didn't touch 141 until I was a flight instructor and started teaching students. Then I entered the 141 world. I did 61 the whole way. I'm a huge supporter of 61. I think it's great to go at your own pace if you have that luxury and you have the time. My first flight lesson and my first flight instructor was just this independent guy. He owned his own airplane. He did something else professionally, and on the weekends he would flight instruct. And I thought that was the best. I thought that was the greatest type, because you really get this one-on-one. And this was an older gentleman. He, again, this was just his hobby. So he really did give it his 100%. And he was very motivated to make sure I had the best education possible. I mean, we were just phasing out, or not quite, but NDBs were just being phased out. And he was like, nope, I'm teaching you the old-fashioned way. And I'm grateful that we did that, because later on in my career, I became a cargo pilot, and I was based in the Caribbean, and NDBs and ADFs and so on and so forth were still in use. And the aircraft I would fly were very unautomated, and it was just bare bones. So it was actually a really good experience. And looking back at that, it's the little things that really make it matter.
Yeah, and we're gonna try to get into detail with your time there as a freight dog. You do share that in common with our very own Captain Roger here. But let's move forward just a little bit and talk about your high school experience. Now, you went to a high school that is very unique in the country and is dedicated for young men and women to study aviation exclusively. Can you tell me a little bit about Aviation High School in Queens?
Sure. In my opinion, Aviation High School, really any technical high school, is the best type, especially for younger people, where it's very easy to become unmotivated with the education system, especially in New York City. And I lived really, really far. It was about a 3-hour commute round trip for me going to Aviation High School on the train. And my zone school was much closer to home. I had a very hard time getting into Aviation High School. I didn't quite have the grades, and I also lived very, very far. So with the New York spirit and fighting attitude, I went over to Aviation High School probably close to a dozen times before I even graduated middle school. And I just bombarded the director of admissions, the deans, the principal, everybody. And it was just a constant. They would see me probably twice a month, and I would go there begging them to let me into the school. And Aviation High School is a maintenance school. It's a 4 to 5 year high school. The 5th year, you get your second license, and you get your airframe power plant licenses over there, which it costs you 50 to 80 grand to do on your own in college or at some aviation maintenance school. And mindset and logic at the time was, okay, well, they don't teach you how to fly. I'll do that on my own, but it'll teach me how to fix airplanes, and it'll teach me, it'll make me a more well-rounded aviator. So yeah, fortunately I was accepted. All that bombarding paid off, and I started aviation in high school, and it was after the first year I realized this is going to be a really tough adventure, because I would leave the house around 5 o'clock in the morning, and during the wintertime you wouldn't even see sunlight, and I would leave school at 4:15 at the earliest, not including extracurriculars, and
Wow.
I would be home and the sun would still be down. So it's like I never saw sunlight. I felt like I was in Alaska.
And Karim, I remember the first time we flew together. And I think actually it was the one and only time we flew together. What can you tell me? Do you remember about that?
I don't remember much. I remember you, and I think I actually might have accidentally rubbed shoulders with you at JFK after the fact. I don't remember much about that, but I remember you, and I remember it was pleasant, and that's why I'm here, and that's what matters, I guess.
Yeah. We flew together. I was, I think I was a new captain, like brand new captain, and you were a new first officer, and together we're like, okay. And I believe that was in New York. And I was, confident and ready to go, but New York was kind of new to me. I had flown in there plenty of times as a first officer, but now being in command of an aircraft and having a new hire next to me, it was intimidating. And I do remember that what impressed me was you were so young, and your level of professionalism, how you spoke, how you dressed the part. Your uniform was, tip top, which is sometimes a rarity with newer aviators. And you were telling me a little bit about how when you were somewhere around high school, you volunteered to be a New York police officer auxiliary officer, and the commonality that we shared was my younger sister did the very same thing here in California. And so I was really impressed how young you were to do that. What sparked that interest?
I really enjoy the volunteer stuff. Anything that has to do with volunteering. Also, law enforcement. I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement. That was always my backup to aviation, I would say. But really, that specific move to sign up and to go to training and to actually do it came from also kind of a funny story. My best friend and I, who's a brilliant kid. He's a Harvard grad, also a pilot, helicopter pilot, fixed wing flight instructor, you name it. Very smart kid. Him and I were watching the movie Let's Be Cops in theaters, and we thought it was the greatest thing ever. So the very next day, we signed up. We went over for our interviews, and it's very hard when you're young, especially. We were just at the age cutoff, and they've actually changed it, and they've made it more competitive and increased the age restrictions because of how dangerous it's starting to become. But we walked in there for the interview, and we had this big, macho, scary-looking police officer that was in charge of everything. And he was like, well, what makes you qualified? And anyway, we started talking about us, and I was a private pilot instrument at the time, and so was Will. And he lost his mind. He went into his wallet. He pulled out a pilot's medical from before I was even born. I mean, the thing was brown. And he said, I was taking flight lessons back then. And sure enough, his instructor at the time was my examiner over the years.
Oh, wow.
And
Small
we just
world.
connected. It's a very small world, and he never pursued aviation as a career. He really wanted to. So over the years of us being with the NYPD, I eventually became his flight instructor, signed him off for his private, and he retired from the NYPD, and now he's trying to turn this into a career. So you just never know how what life throws at you.
Yeah. You have to pay attention and seize those moments when you see them. And yeah, absolutely. What a great story about a small world of aviation. And somewhere around 2012, you joined the Civil Air Patrol. What did the Civil Air Patrol give you, and what did you give to the Civil Air Patrol?
So CAP was short-lived because I was actively working on flying and taking flight lessons. I was also in the JROTC in my high school, again, kind of the service before self and just volunteering. But really, CAP was me exploring the military option. I was really kind of considering joining the military as an air traffic controller, not even as a pilot, and then eventually started shifting my attention to maybe becoming a helicopter pilot in the Army, and so on and so forth. And that was just a really good experience for me to just get a little bit of a taste of how things could be. Putting on the uniform every day, dressing sharp, and you mentioned that earlier about the first time you met me, and just the image you portray, and the way you present yourself in the uniform and all that, and that's kind of where a lot of that came from. It's really important, especially when you're young, to portray yourself appropriately, to fit the part, so that your passengers and your coworkers are confident in your abilities and are confident in you as a professional.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, I think, I don't know if I've ever shared this story. You've reminded me of this, and Rob and Roger, feel free to jump in on this. I believe perception in this career field is close to everything. We people really don't understand, the typical passenger, the typical person who buys an airline ticket doesn't really understand the complexities of our profession, and they think we push a button to take off and I'll push a button to land. Oh, the planes fly themselves, right? Like those Teslas? No. And so, and add on top of that, what we're required to know knowledge-wise, to be able to speak all those different types of languages, be it communication with ATC, regulations, aircraft operations and systems, to charts and IFR flight planning and weather, reading the weather charts. It's a lot of information. So to show up prepared, clean, pressed, shoes polished, I think it's extremely important. I've been asked that question on interviews. I was asked that question when I was interviewing to become a check airman, as my short time that I was doing that job. The person who was given the interview said, what do you think of the uniform? How important is it? It's extremely important. And to be here at this level, whether that's flying a small piston-powered airplane around for a Part 91 operator, to flying a $1 million corporate jet, to flying in an airline, it's all crucial that we kind of portray this particular standard of how we come across. And it reminds me of a story that a captain once told me, that he was giving IOE to a student, and the student showed up, and he came early, and he says, "Hey, well, while you're here, let's do a little Chicago O'Hare review, so that when we get in the airplane, you can kind of follow along on your first day." And the student was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure." And so while the check airman was talking to him, he pulls out his phone and he's answering a text message. And so the check airman stops, and he's like, "I'll wait." And, "Oh, sorry. So the student puts away the phone, and now he's giving him more. "Okay, so we're going to talk to here, we're going to talk to ramp, and here's the taxi route we're going to take, so that way you can follow along," and stuff like that. And another text message comes down, and the student picks up his phone, and he's looking at his phone, and the check airman goes, "You know what? F you." And he walks out of the crew room, and the senior FO that was flying with the check airman, because this was an observation, tells the student, "Okay, dude, just get your stuff. Let's go to the airplane. We'll go do a walk around." So they go do the walk around, and this poor guy is like, now kind of like, "Oh crap, I screwed up. I'm going to get fired." He's sitting on the jet bridge. The captain shows up intentionally like 10 minutes prior to departure with a coffee in his hand, gets in the cockpit, gets everything set up. The FO he was flying with had it all set up for him. Everybody's boarded up, and this new hire sticks his head meekly into the cockpit and says, "Are you? Is it cool?" That he turns around, he goes, "I don't know. Is it cool? Am I going to see that damn phone again during this trip?" He's like, No, you won't." He goes, "I better not." So they flew together, and he says, "You know what? By the second day, this guy was on it. He was studying. He was really well prepared. I thought I got through to him. I actually thought, you know what? This is just a little kick in the pants he needed. I got through to him. He's going to be professional." Well, a month later, he's walking down the terminal, Terminal G in Chicago, and he sees this kid walking towards him. His shirt's untucked, his collar's open, the tie's all loose, his pants look like crap. He doesn't have the jacket on, And he walks right up to him. And he just reads him the riot act. And he's like, I should write you up right now, And it was all one of those things where he just didn't really respect the uniform. And so to come across and meet somebody, especially somebody young that's in the industry, this is their first airline job, it's really nice to see when someone comes prepared and how important it is to keep that standard. And you get it.
Yeah, if
Absolutely.
you look at it, even like in today's world, like right now with the pandemic and everything that's going on, if we walk up to the airplane without a mask or half-assing it with a mask, I mean, how much confidence does that give the traveling public? I mean, just those little things, like you said, just the way you wear your uniform, wear your mask, not looking at your phone when you're being briefed or whatever, something like that. I mean, those little things go a long way.
Yeah. And the worst is when they're deplaning and you're in the cockpit or on the jet bridge and the passengers are walking by and they're saying, thank you. And you're like,
yeah, no way.
Yeah.
I put it down. I say thank you to everybody.
It's all part of the job. That's actually it should be a job description because it's all part of the job. And it's important to dress properly in anything, in any aspect of your life. Unless you're sitting at home wearing penguin pajamas like I was not very long ago.
Well played.
Behind closed doors. But otherwise, it's important to dress professionally. I'm a skinny guy. I'm a very skinny guy. It's very difficult to keep my shirt tucked in and looking sharp and professional. The solution to that for all you future young aviators they're called slingshots. They're like $5. You attach them to your sock, you attach them to the bottom of your shirt, and it keeps it nice and straight forever. And I've been doing that since high school, and they're great and they're cheap, and you'll look like $1 million every time.
Yeah, I have quite a few different varieties of that in my drawer too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm no longer skinny.
Yeah, I've got a nice little like indentation around my waist. Everything kind of just sets in.
It's really funny. I'll look at photos over the years, right, of how I used to dress, even when I would be in a suit or whatever at a very young age. And I look and you can see the progression. You can say, okay, well, that's around the year I started getting things tailored. And that's the year that I started wearing slingshots. And that's the year that I started. So it's really important. It's an ongoing challenge, and it's good to get with the times and to always look your very best. That's the only way people are going to take you seriously, especially if you're young.
Yeah, and you open up the door for opportunity when you're doing that. I can tell you stories on how walking through the terminal, I've been stopped by little old ladies because when I was captain in New York City, I would always wear the hat, and people looked at me, you've got 2 of the 3, and I'm like, 2 of the 3? What are you talking about? I had an FO tell me one time, you got salt and pepper hair, that's strike 1. You wear the hat, that's strike 2. The only thing you don't have is a mustache, that's strike 3. And I'm like, well, what happened if I was 3? He goes, then you'd be an asshole. And so what did I do? A month later, I had a mustache for a while. But I always wore the hat, and I can't tell you how many times I got stopped by a little lady going, "Oh, you look so sharp, Captain." I'm like, "Yeah, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that." And that little tiny interaction, that meant the world to me, just to be recognized for that. So